Hare. Namaste, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Gaura Bhakti Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So in this material world, some people just work very hard and make some money and buy some food and get a house and go on living their life for 30 or 40 or 50 years or whatever, how long life lasts. And many people are just content with that they can live a normal, material, peaceful life. Still, people require more than that. So therefore we see people don't just live, then they require some relaxation or something. And so therefore, like in here, you have these big sporting arenas or whatever. What do they call it? Stadiums, okay. And then they have football or cricket, or what else they do here? Soccer or whatever, and everyone gets excited about that. And of course then they have their other recreation, and just going to the bar and drink. So they got some extraneous things also which give some meaning to their life. And if they don't have those things, then they're very dissatisfied. So this is a typical society. It's not just Australia, it's around the world. You get the same thing. People working hard in their jobs, and they get their house and raise their families, and they go out and get excited with, hockey games or whatever they're doing. And they don't get drunk or whatever, a little intoxication like that. So that's just a normal thing in the material world, and it's been there since time immemorial. We find that even in the caveman societies, they were also got liquor and things like that. 12,000 years ago, they invented liquor or something, and they were drinking then also. Or before that, they also were smoking and all sorts of things as well. Maybe 30,000 years ago, they found marijuana and they were smoking. So, this is this normal human life. However, people also begin to question, is this all there is to life? Not everybody, but some of these people begin to question. And we see these are the questions that arise in the Vedas. The questions begin to ask, who are we? Why do we exist? What is the purpose of life? And of course, not only in India, we'll see around the world. So we'll see in ancient Greece, philosophers arose and they start asking the same questions. Why do we exist? What is our whole purpose in life? This, of course, is a little abstract for the normal, person just working and trying to enjoy the material world. But we have a few people like this who begin to think. So Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning of the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, then he says, well, normal people are like animals, and they eat, sleep, mate, and defend. And that's basically what they do. But that's animal life. So the human being also is more intelligent, more self-aware, and therefore he starts asking questions, well, why am I doing all this? What is the real purpose of life? It is all the eating, sleeping, and whatnot. And then he asks, what is the meaning of life, etc. And we see in all sorts of civilizations, and they seek out some meaning. Even if we have so-called primitive societies or caveman societies or whatever, even they're asking these questions in maybe a more primitive way, but they're looking for answers, etc. So we see in early civilizations in different countries, and probably in Australia also, they begin looking at the sky, and they see the planets moving around, and they're trying to figure out why the planets are moving like this, why do we have eclipses, whatever, what is destiny, how do we know the future? And this happens all around the world. So we find, like in England, they have Stonehenge. People that didn't even have tools where they used to accept stones. And then they make pull these huge stones from all over the place and make circles, and then they calculate very scientifically, so to speak, so they can predict eclipses, which probably normal person now can't do. But they learned how to do all these things in very ancient times. So, human being also has this propensity to be self-aware and to ask these questions. So that's what Prabhupada says. A human being, yes, he eats and sleeps and makes independence, but then he also asks these questions. And hopefully he can get answers. Now, of course, a lot of people ask the questions, they don't get answers. And maybe they ask the question too late. So sometimes we find that people that are living online, and then suddenly they get the notice you're going to die in 10 days, or in case of Pariksha, it was 7 days. And then suddenly they begin to think, well, what was the purpose of all this? I worked for, 60 years, 8-10 hours a day, and now I got some money, but I can't even take the money with me. My children are all grown up, my wife has died, and I'm sitting here alone. Oh, why did I do all this? But it's too late. So they ask the question at the end of their life when they should have asked it at the beginning of their life. So, of course, Prahlad says this, that generally, we should ask these questions when we're 5 years old, in fact. But most people don't ask it until they're 80 years old or something, and it's too late, and we don't get an answer when they die in a very miserable state. So, anyway, the human being should ask these questions and should get answers. But because we are a little bit not so intelligent, Scripture gives us some answers, gives us some guidance on this answer, who am I, what is my purpose in life, etc. So that's the purpose of Scripture. Yeah? And the answer is not eating, sleeping, bathing, defending, because we already know about that. Of course, that's what science gives us. It gives you better ways to eat and sleep and bathe and defend, whatever. But that's not the answer to this other question, who am I? Yeah? So this is where the Scripture becomes important for us. If you have these questions, then you go to the Scripture. So we have many Scriptures around the world. Different religions have different Scriptures. They give an answer to some degree. Unfortunately, when religions get very codified, and they reach a certain age, hundreds of years and whatever of existence, and they begin to codify their doctrines, often the original intent becomes lost. And that whole religion gets stuck on certain formulas or certain phrases, etc. And it often gets influenced by material ideas later on, so that the original intent becomes completely lost, and therefore it's not so satisfying anymore. So, therefore we also have Scriptures, but we also have to see what was the original intent of the Scriptures. So anyway, we do have Scriptures around the world. And as human beings, we are free to choose any of these Scriptures and try to see if they're satisfying to us. And nobody can argue with that. If you have faith in the Bible or faith in the Quran, fine. Can't persuade you to be unfaithful or whatever. If you have faith in the Vedas, fine. You accept that. However, if one is intelligent and one goes through the different Scriptures, then one should actually try to get the answer to these questions. Who am I? What is my real goal in life? And if you don't find an answer to that, then you better look at another Scripture. Because as I said, usually what happens is the Scriptures get a little bit distorted after 100 years or 200 or 300 years, and things start changing, and then eventually the meaning gets lost. So we do have to look for what is the actual meaning here, and if we can't find it, then go somewhere else and try to get the answers. So, if we go to the Vedic literatures, of course, even if we go to the Vedic literatures, you can have some problems. Because you get all sorts of confusing, contradictory statements here and there, whatever. So, we do have to take very seriously how we study these Vedic literatures as well. But, if we follow the proper procedure of study, that is, take it through some tradition, parampara, sampradaya, then we can actually get the meaning. And then we will start getting real answers. So, if we choose the Vedic literature, fine, as I said, it becomes a little confusing. And so therefore the sages also simplified things. We have 4 Vedas. Of course, one Veda to begin with. Vedavyas wrote, he didn't write, he actually preserved the Veda. Then this is a little complicated for people. So he put it into 4 sections. And then he gave one disciple one section, another disciple another section, this way, so that they could carry on tradition and the meaning of that particular Veda. So he made one Veda into 4 Vedas for easier understanding. And they passed it on. But then he understood the people in this age would not be able to understand the Vedas properly because the language is very complicated. It's a little bit different from Sanskrit. Grammar is a little different. Words are a little different. Meaning is a little bit more mysterious, whatever. So then he thought of writing other things to explain them. So he wrote the Brahma Sutras to explain the Upanishads. Unfortunately, when we read the Brahma Sutras, even that is confusing for us. Because it's just little sutras, so different people interpret everything in different ways, and we get opposite meanings there as well. So Vedavyas thought, let's do another thing. Let's make everything into story form. So he wrote Mahabharata. Nice stories. Even today, people are interested in all these stories. But within that, he also gives the essential teachings of the Vedas. So therefore we get Bhagavad Gita, which is called Gita Upanishad, which means part of the Vedas, essence of the Vedas. So that gives us a nice summary. And that is why Srila Prabhupada translated and wrote commentary on Bhagavad Gita. So this gives us the essential meaning of the Vedas. And what ultimately is the meaning of the Vedas? It is expressed in Bhagavad Gita. So there we have a definition of who is God. What is our relationship with God? What is our goal in life? Who are we? All these questions get answered very simply in the second chapter. So, we got a very, very simple way of doing things by reading a simple answer, by reading Bhagavad Gita. And there we get some definition of who is God or Bhagavan. To expand that, of course, the definition of Bhagavan and description of Bhagavan and what is his form and what are his activities, Vedavyas also wrote other works, Puranas. And among the Puranas, the final one is Srimad Bhagavatam. So Bhagavatam is about Bhagavan. So there we have a very nice description of Bhagavan in detail. His pastimes, qualities, and his form. And the process of bhakti to realize Bhagavan. So these 2 works are primary works which we should study to get an answer who is Supreme Lord, who is Bhagavan. So, of course, the concept of God is kind of universal. Everybody, well not everybody, but those people who are religious, whatever, have some concept of some supreme being or some entity or something up there, which is controlling everything. And so then that type of person, we say, is kind of religious or spiritual or whatever. And that gets codified in different ways, in different cultures, etc. And therefore we'll find in ancient cultures, they had the sun god and the moon god and the wind god and the ocean god, etc. like this, and they worship these forms. Then we get what we call more advanced religions, where they think not many gods, one God. There should be one God, one supreme God. Okay? So that we get another trend, and we get major religions having one God. Then this becomes a little complicated because one God is there, but then we have to describe him. What is his name? And then we get different names for God. And then different religions have different names, and they say this God is different from that God, or whatever like that. So we quarrel over the names. And then, who is that God, and what are his powers? Then there's also confusion about that. So then we get different religions with different beliefs, religions around the world, etc. The Srimad Bhagavatam is very liberal in one sense, because it accepts that people will have different conceptions of God. Not all the conceptions are true, but there's a latitude in which we get true conceptions of God which are acceptable, not just one. And if we examine that closely, we can include in that conception in the Bhagavatam most of the religions of the world. So, on one hand, we'll get what we call the extreme impersonal God. There is a supreme entity, but he doesn't have a form, he doesn't even have a name, and no qualities, no activities. That's the extreme form. And we'll find that in Shankaracharya's Mayavad philosophy. And we'll find it even more extreme in Buddhism, which they don't even call it an entity, they call it nothingness. But there's something there, and you have to realize there's something, which is no form, no qualities, no activities, no name, etc. That's the extreme form. This is what we call Brahman. That is acceptable, is one vision of God that you could have. Then we have, God is not just completely impersonal. Let's give him a name, a little bit of a name. Let's give him some activity. Let's give him a few qualities. God is merciful, God is powerful, God is omniscient. God creates the world, God destroys the world. Very general, but no form. So this is where many religions of the world fall. Not completely impersonal, but slightly impersonal, still no form. And minimum qualities, minimum activities, etc. Islam, Christianity, Judaism all fall in that category. Buddhism is more extreme. If we go a little further, then we say, okay, God has some qualities, some activities, and he has a form, and by which he creates the material world, destroys the material world. This is where we get Paramatma form. Form of God who creates and destroys. Full of all knowledge, chit. Spiritual form. And this is what the yogis worship and realize. But the Brahman concept is not rejected. If we do Jnana Yoga, we can realize that. If we do Astanga Yoga, we realize Paramatma. If we go further and say, well, God creates the world, God destroys the world, what else does he do? He's eternal. What else does he do? So therefore we say God is in the spiritual world and he has activities completely separate from the material world. He has relationships with devotees, etc. And we get concept of Bhagavan. So therefore, broadly we can classify God into these three types. Impersonal, Brahman, slightly personal, Paramatma, and very personal, Bhagavan. And Bhagavatam says they're all valid realizations of the Supreme Lord. And thus, we can't say condemn one or the other. However, we cannot say they're all equal also. So, not equal because the more knowledge we have of God, the better realization. So, if we realize God but no form, no qualities, no activities, is like a minimum realization. And if we realize God with no form but a few qualities, it's a little better. If we realize God with form, qualities, activities, and all sorts of forms, etc., then that's more detailed. So, more knowledge. So therefore the superior realization is Bhagavan over Paramatma and Brahman. Nevertheless, it's all one, and Bhagavan accepts it all. According to your method, you can realize different aspects of God. As you can realize in this material world, different aspects of a hill. If you realize a hill from 20 miles away, a little bump on the horizon, okay, it's not untrue, it's true. It's not an illusion. If you go 3 miles away, Then you see height of the mountain or hill. You'll see if it's got trees on it. Maybe some rocks there or whatever. It's also true. It's more complete knowledge than if you realize it from 20 miles away. If you approach the mountain, and if you're lucky, you start climbing up the hill, you get more detailed knowledge. You can analyze the species of trees. Maybe it's pine trees and cedar trees on the mountain or whatever. You can even measure the height of the trees and whatever, their condition, whether they're diseased or healthy or whatever. You can see if there's some squirrels running around, there's some deer or some, what do they have here? Kangaroos. Wombats. Whatever is there on the mountain. You can analyze in detail so many things. And maybe some people living on the mountain, little houses, we don't know. So you get more knowledge according to how close you are to the mountain. So in other words, Bhakti Yoga brings you closest to God. You get more realization of God, His qualities, His activities, and the relationship with Him. But it doesn't negate realizing God from 20 miles away or whatever. It's all real, but nevertheless better if we got more complete realization. So this is the concept of Bhagavatam. And therefore we don't have to quarrel with other religions or whatever. But we understand that the more knowledge we have of God, and we set that as our goal, then we're going to have more satisfaction. So, what does Bhagavan mean? Prabhupada usually translates this as Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, most people repeat that term, but they don't quite know what it means even. Personality, whatever. Godhead, what is that? The term Bhagavan is explained in different ways. One is by taking the syllables Ba, Ga, and Va. So Ba stands for Bharta, which comes from the word birth, to support or maintain. So in other words, the Supreme Lord is the one who supports and nourishes the devotees. Yeah, nice. The Lord is merciful, and He helps nourish the devotee and make him satisfied. A Ga stands for Gam, Gamayata, which means to make, attain, to have the devotee attain something. So the Lord has the devotee manifest wonderful spiritual qualities. He manifests prema in the devotees, supreme love, and He gives them a place in the spiritual world, Vaikuntha Loka. That is Ya. And Va, or Vas, which means to live. So, the devotees live in the Lord. And that means that the Lord is always thinking of the devotees. And the Lord is in the devotees, which means the devotees are always thinking of Supreme Lord. So that's Vas. So there's always constant meditation on the devotees, constant meditation by the devotees on the Supreme Lord. So this is Bhagavan. So that's one way we can understand the word Bhagavan. In other words, very personal God who supports the devotees in all ways. This is the common definition of the Lord with 6 qualities: Aishvarya, Virya, Yasa, Shriya, Jnana, and Vairagya. 6 qualities that constitute Bhagavan. Aishvarya comes from the word Isha, or Ishvara, means the controller. So, by nature, He automatically controls everything in the material world and the spiritual world. Virya means He has inconceivable potencies by which He can manifest Himself in the material world, outside the material world, in all the jivas, simultaneously in all universes, plus in the spiritual world in so many different forms. This is Virya. Yasa means fame, literally fame, but also means He has all sorts of wonderful, attractive spiritual qualities in His form or body, in His senses, and His mind, which are to be praised by everybody. It's Yasa. Shri means, of course, Shri means like good fortune, like Lakshmi. It also means beauty and youth. So the Lord has an eternal, beautiful form which never decays. And Jnana means, of course, full of knowledge of everything, past, present, future. And Vairagya, completely uncontaminated by the material world. Even though the Lord enters into the material world, enters into all the jivas, he is untouched in all cases, past, present, and future. He controls matter, enters into it, unaffected by it. So this is the second definition of Bhagavan. So he is a form of a person who has personal relationship with his devotees. He is the supreme entity. So therefore, a supreme person. So, as we see, many religions have the difficulty accepting that God has a form. Why is that? Because normally forms are material and limited. Forms we have here are destructible. Every form disappears, dies, gets destroyed. So God could not be like that. And even if it doesn't get destroyed, if we give God a form, it's limited. Maybe, 5 feet tall, 6 feet tall, 2 feet wide, whatever. We put a limit on God. God should be unlimited. So when we need a form, then we'll think of some sort of limitation, even if we think it's spiritual. So, therefore, many religions don't want to represent God in any way. And if you do, it's considered to be blasphemy to give a form to God. There is no hesitation in the Vedic literature to give a form to God. This is what makes the Vaishnava belief so unique. Even in the Vedas, a lot of people will not give a form to God. That's the impersonalist, Brahman, etc. It's only the Vaishnavas that tell God has a form. Some of all the religions of the world, even in India and the Vedas, not that many people accept actual form of God. So the Vaishnava is very unique in doing that, accepting form of God. And no struggle to accept it because we understand form is spiritual, and because it is spiritual, it is unlimited. It's beyond our material conception, but it is a form, without the limitations that seem to manifest in the material. But not only do we accept God as a form, we can say God has many forms, infinite forms, which is even more radical. Not just God as a form, God has many forms. And not only God has many forms, God would have many different forms. So he can have a human-like form as Rama or Krishna. And he can be different colors, like blue or green, or it can be red, or it can be yellow, or it can be white, it can be black, maybe even purple or something. And he can not just be a human being, okay, he can be a little human being like Vamana. He can be a big human being like Parsaram, Kshatriya. He can be a sage, like Vedavyas. He can be a renunciate, like Narayana, very renounced, or Rishabhadev. But he can also be an animal, or a snake, like Shesha, Ananta. He can be a boar, Varaha. He can be a fish, Mina, a Matsya, turtle, Urma, bird, Hamsa. So besides being human form, you can also have other forms as well. You can be a horse form also. So God can have all sorts of different forms because he is unlimited and it's all spiritual. So no problem. So this is a very unique concept that we have. Of course, the other thing that is unique is not only does God have a form which is all spiritual, but we can also represent that form in the material world in the form of our murtis, our Chivigraha. That's also very controversial. No, we can't make God because it's got a material form, etc. So, nevertheless, we do represent God in the temple with the form under certain conditions. And that is that we have a Pratishtha ceremony which sanctifies that form and makes them into Supreme Lord, so it's no longer material energy. So there's some, special rituals so that that form becomes sanctified and spiritual. So in any case, we have form of God. So not only are forms of God, the forms also are graded, just as we have Brahmanas, like the inferior form, Brahmana is a little better, Bhagavan is best. Now we have forms of Bhagavan. And so we have the lesser forms, and we have the greater forms. And then we have the topmost form. So the topmost form is Krishna. He is called Swayam Bhagavan or Swayam Rupa. We can say he is the topmost and therefore independent of all the other forms. All the qualities that are in the other forms manifest in this one form. That is Krishna. So, Krishna is the full manifestation of all the qualities of God. That form of Krishna can then expand himself also into unlimited forms, which is exactly the same Krishna. So we call these Prakash forms. So, for instance, in the Rasa Lila, it is said that when Krishna, they used flute, attracted all the gopis out of their homes, and met in the forest, there were 3 billion gopis there. And Krishna expanded himself into 3 billion forms. So what do you have to do with each gopi? No problem for the Supreme Lord. He's unlimited. And he's exactly the same. No one can think that there's 3 billion forms. No, they all thought there's one Krishna there and he's with me. Nature, Supreme Lord can expand himself in unlimited form. And of course, he expands himself into all sorts of universes in the material world, simultaneously in the spiritual world. So he can expand himself. But then, he can expand himself into other forms, which are slightly different. So we have Vishnu forms, slightly different. Color is similar, but he has 4 arms. Then he has Shankha and Chakra, etc. Slightly different, slightly less manifestation of qualities. We call that the last form. And then if this form expands again, very similar but slightly less qualities, we call it Swamsa. Just as we see that the Vaikuntha form expands into Mahavishnu. So then Mahavishnu comes with slightly less manifestation than the Vaikuntha form. And then, so he's a Swamsa form, Mahavishnu. Then Mahavishnu expands into Garbhodaksha Vishnu in each universe. So that 40 minutes is slightly less quality. So he is a Swamsa form of Mahavishnu. And then Garbhodaksha Vishnu expands into Kshirodaksha Vishnu, who's a Swamsa form of Garbhodaksha Vishnu. So it manifests slightly less qualities. Doesn't mean the qualities aren't there, but in that particular form, he limits his qualities to some degree. So in this way, we get forms gradually manifesting less and less quality, but it's all one Bhagavan. Apart from that, we got Avesha form, or Shakti-Avesh forms. These are not Supreme Lord at all, they're actually jivas who have special powers eternally endowed in them. And Narada Muni and Kumaras and Parsaram and Prakutis are Shakti-Avesh avatars. So they're not actually Lord, but they got special powers, so we also call them avatars. So, we got Swami Krishna at the top, then we have the Tadikatma Rupa, then we have the Vilas and the Swamsa forms, then we have the Aveshrupa forms. So, when the Lord is in the spiritual world, fine. Sometimes the Lord will come into the material world. When he does so, we call him avatar, which means to descend. So the forms in the spiritual world are eternal, but they can manifest themselves in the material world. They still maintain their spiritual form. They do not become contaminated. They're called avatars. So, in the Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is classification of these avatars. You got Purusha avatars, Guna avatars, Lila avatars, Manvatar avatars, and Yuga avatars. These are the forms of the Lord that will manifest in the material world for particular purposes. So, the Purusha avatars have a special position. They're actually called Paramatma forms. These are the forms that deal with the material world. We have Mahavishnu or Karnodakshaya Vishnu, who is Mahashankarshan, and he presides over all Prakriti, the whole vast Prakriti. And he glances over it and manifests out of property all the material elements that form into millions and millions of little universes, like atoms. Once the universes are formed, then he expands himself in the universe as Garbhodaksha Vishnu. And Garbhodaksha Vishnu presides over one universe. And from his navel springs Brahma. And then Brahma takes the elements, sticks them into bodies, makes bodies for living entities and planetary systems. So this way, the universe becomes populated. And then, that Garbhodaksha Vishnu expands into Kshirodaksha Vishnu. And as Kshirodaksha Vishnu expands himself into all the jivas in the material world. So he limits himself into each body. And Garbhodaksha Vishnu in charge of each one universe, and Karadaksha Vishnu in charge of all the universes. So this way, they monitor the production and destruction of the material world and all the activities of the jivas. So they're related to material management, so to speak. And these are the Purusha avatars. We have guna avatars in charge of gunas. We have 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the Lord appoints different persons in charge. So for sattva, we have a form of Vishnu, that is Kshirodaksha Vishnu in charge of sattva. We have Brahma, who's actually a jiva in most cases, empowered by the Lord to carry out the creation. And Rajagun. Rajagun is the creative quality, so Brahma's in charge of that. And Shiva, usually Supreme Lord, the form of the Supreme Lord, that manifests 5 less qualities than Vishnu. He is in charge of tamagun and destruction. Sometimes the Jiva takes the role of Shiva also. So these are the guna avatars, in charge of creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe. So something like the Purusha avatars, they relate to material world. Okay, yeah. So within the, Brahma has 160 days made up of 1,000 yuga cycles in each day. And 360 days make 1 year, and he lives for 100 of his years. So within 1 day, just as we have hours in our day, like sunrise and then first hour, second hour, so within the day of Brahma, we have 14 divisions called manvantara periods. And each manvantara period has 71 yuga cycles in it. We multiply 71 times 14, it's approximately 1,000 yugas like that. So they're all given different names listed here. So within those manvantara periods, these lila avatars begin to appear. Many have appeared in Swayambhuva Manvantara, also we have in Chakshusha Manvantara, and our particular Vaivasvata Manvantara. We'll talk about that. So, for instance, in the first part of the day of Brahma, like is, let's say, 6:30 in the morning, 6:30 to 7 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, then we have so many avatars appearing. We have the Kumaras appearing from Brahma. They're actually Shaktivesh avatars, and they are empowered to impart jnana, yoga. Narada Muni appears. He's also a Shaktivesh avatar, a jiva with special powers, and he teaches bhakti yoga, also coming from Brahma. These two actually, they last throughout the lifetime of Brahma. They don't have to get born every day, but they last throughout the whole life of Brahma. In that first Manvantara period, we also get Varaha period, and of course he lifts the earth out of the Garbhoda ocean. And we have Matsya period also in that period. He saves the Vedas. We get Yajna period. He saves Swayambhuva Manu. We have Narayana period, and they teach renunciation. Kapila appears and teaches Sankhya, Bhakti, and Yoga as a sage. We have Dattatreya appear, giving basically Jnana Yoga, Adhyatma Jnana. Hayagriva appears, manifests the Vedas, and destroys Madhu Kaitava. Hamsa appears and teaches, he's a bird form. He teaches Bhakti, Jnana, and Yoga. Dhruva Priya, this is the form that appeared to Dhruva Maharaj, but Dhruva Priya Prishnigarbha. Also, Rishabha appears, and he teaches again renunciation. And Prithu is an Avesh avatar who appears and levels the earth so they can do agriculture. So these all appear in that first hour of Brahma's day, Swayambhuva Manvantara period. When we get to the sixth period, it's almost by noontime, we get Chakshusha Manvantara. There we get Nrsimhadeva appearing, and he kills Hiranyakasipu, saves Prahlad. We get Kurma appearing when the Devatas and demons are churning the milk ocean. But then the Mandara mountain begins to sink, so then Kurma appears and holds up the Mandara mountain so they can churn it and get the nectar. So that's Kurma appearing. And when they churn, Dhanvantari appears and gives the nectar. He again appears later in the next Manvantara period, our Manvantara, that's why it was the Manvantara, and he gives Ayurveda. Mohini also appears because the demons steal the nectar. So then the Devatas are very disturbed, so Mohini appears in the form of a woman, and she goes over to the demons and takes the nectar and gives it to the Devatas. It's Mohini avatar. And Matsya appears at the end. He saves Satyavrata, and he begins the next period, Vaivasata Manvantara period. And Varaha appears and kills Hiranyaksha in this period also. So Varaha appears twice actually. Matsya also appears actually 14 times. And then we come to our particular period now, which is like noontime, 7th Manvantara out of 14, halfway through the day of Brahma. And we get Vamana appearing. He actually appears like 3 times, actually once in Swayambhuva Manvantara, and then also in our Manvantara as well, twice. Dwarf form, Brahmachari, who expands himself and defeats Bali, etc. We have Parsuram appearing in the 22nd Yuga cycle of our Manvantara period. Kills the wicked Kshatriyas. And in the 24th cycle, 2 cycles after Parsuram, we get Rama appearing, who kills Ravana. And then in the 28th cycle, that's 4 cycles later, or 16 million years later, we get Vasudeva appearing, who divides one Veda into 4 at the end of the Dwapara Yuga. And then, also at the end of the Dwapara Yuga, we have Balaram and Krishna appearing. And then in the Kali Yuga of the 28th cycle, we have Buddha appearing, who's also Avesh avatar. Some say he appears every Kali Yuga. And at the end of the Kali Yuga, then we have Kalki appear, who's also considered to be Avesh avatar, Jiva as well. So that brings us to the Leela avatars. So as I said, we have all these Manvantara periods, each with the Manu in charge. And during that period, we also get Manvantara avatars. These are avatars of the Lord who remain for 71 Yuga cycles through those different periods. So we get all these different avatars. For instance, Gajendra was saved by a form of the Lord. He's called Hari. So that was in the 4th Manvantara period ruled by Tamasa. Chakshusha Manvantara, the avatar, is Ajita, who stood on top, sat on top of the Mandara mountain while they were churning at this in the Chakshusha Manvantara. And in our Manvantara, the Vamana stays in Sutala Loka for 71 Yuga cycles. So these avatars last a long time. The Leela avatars may stay for 1,000 years, or in Krishna's form, 125 years only, so some quite short. But the Manvantara avatars will stay for the whole 71 Yuga cycles. So the Lord protects the devotees at all times. That. Yeah. And even there's avatars for the future. After Vaivasata Manvantara, we get these other Manus, we get avatars as well. Okay. So then the last type are called the Yuga avatars. Right? So we have the Manvantara avatar, who lasts for 71 Yuga cycles. He expands into the Yuga avatars. 71 yuga cycles, and he expands into the Satya Yuga avatar, the Treta Yuga avatar, etc. Leela avatars are said to come from Gargaksha Vishnu. So, we have 1,000 yuga cycles in the day of Brahma, and 71 of those in each Manvantara period. And in all of those periods, we have Satya, Treta, or Kali lasting over 4 million years. So in each of those yugas, we have a form of the Lord appearing to teach the Yuga Dharma. So in Satya Yuga, we have a white form called Sukla, who teaches meditation. In Treta Yuga, we have a red form called Rakta, who teaches Yajna. In Dwapara Yuga, we have a blackish form, Shama, who teaches deity worship. And in Kali Yuga, we have a black form called Krishna, who teaches Nama Sankirtan. So of course, the one Kali Yuga is empowered avatar. However, in our case, it's a little different in this 28th cycle, because in Dwapara Yuga, it's not the usual Yuga avatar. It is Krishna himself who appears. It's not just avatar, he is Swami Bhagavan. And in Kali Yuga, it's not a Shaktavesh avatar or Jiva, it's not black. It is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, non-different from Krishna. So exception in our particular Yuga cycle. So that's basically the different forms. So we can classify these different forms. Of course, they're ultimately all one, but one God that expands into many forms. In those many forms, he displays different amounts of qualities and powers. So according to the amounts of powers he displays, we can start classifying those that show less powers, those that show more powers. Like the moon. We have one moon, but we call it different names on different days. Why? Because it shows different amounts of light. So one day is called Purnima because it shows 100% light. Later on, 15 days later, we call it Amavasya. It doesn't show any light. And in between, we get gradual decrease or increase. So like that, one moon is there. So there's one Bhagavan, but he takes many forms, like the different phases of the moon. And in those different forms, we'll split different amounts of qualities. Like the Purnima is there, and the Pratipad, the Dvitiya, and the Tritiya, different amounts of light show. So different forms show different amounts of qualities of God. The different Shaktis, such as ability to control others, sweetness, mercy, power over time and time. So different forms will show different amounts of powers. And therefore we can grade them. As I said, they're all one, just as fire is one, whether it's in a little candle flame or in a big fire. And in either case, you could burn down the whole town with a little candle if you want to, or with a big fire, doesn't matter. The same Shakti is there. Nevertheless, if we take the little candle, you cannot keep yourself warm on a cold day. But if you have the whole fire, then you can keep warm. So there's also some variation in the amount of heat that they're giving out, even though they're actually one. Huh? So we can classify them in terms of the powers, etc. So at the bottom we'll have the Avesh forms, are actually Jivas, but they're quite limited. And the rest of the, like Kumaras, Narada, Tuparsara, Kalki, Buddha, Kali Yuga Avatar, except for Lord Chaitanya. And Shesha, who holds up the earth, as opposed to the other Shesha, who's the bed of Vishnu. That's the earth holding up. Okay. So, among the forms of God, not the Jivas, then we have Prabhava forms. Some show less power, and they're just there for a short period, like Mohini, Hamsa, and the Yuga avatars. And basically, they teach something, or do one or two pastimes. They may show a little more powers, such as Dhanvantari, who teaches medicine, Rishabhadev teaches renunciation, Vyasadeva divides the Vedas, Dattatreya teaches Jnana, Kapila teaches Bhakti, etc. Basically, sages. These are called Prabhava forms. When they show more powers, etc., they're called Vaibhava forms. So we get Kurma, who holds up the Mandara mountain, we have Matsya, who saves the Vedas, Narnarayan, and they defeat Kamadev, Prishnigarva, Baladev, 14 Manvantara avatars. And then we have those that show more powers, called Paravasta forms, such as Varaha, Hayagriva, Hari, Vaikuntha, Achyuta, and Vamana. And then we have the topmost forms, 4 avatars, Nrsimha, Rama, and Krishna. So Krishna shows the most powers, the most qualities. Rama next, Nrsimhadev next, and then the others below. So we get Purna at the top, Paravasta next, Vaibhava next, Prabhava next, and then Avesha, which are the jivas at the bottom. So we can put them in this hierarchy according to how much power and qualities they manifest. So in the topmost category, we have Nrsimha, Rama, and Krishna at the top. So this is the whole point of Bhagavatam, to show not just Bhagavan, but to show that Krishna is the most complete manifestation of Bhagavan. So whole Bhagavatam is dedicated to Krishna. Even with Krishna, he will manifest different amounts of qualities. So in Dwarka, he's called Purna, and Mathura is called Purnatara, which means more complete, and in Vrindavan he's called Purnatama, most complete. So he manifests his rasas and everything most completely in Vrindavan. So all the forms of Krishna, Vrindavan Krishna is considered to be the most complete of all, even though all forms of Krishna are complete. And even in Vrindavan, we'll have different rasas, all the way up to Madhurya Rasa. And as we go through Shanta Rasa, the Dasya Rasa, the Sakya Rasa, the Vatsalya Rasa, the Madhurya Rasa, they become more and more intense. The bliss becomes more intense and sweeter until we get the sweetest of all. So the sweetest manifestation of Krishna and the gopis is at the top. That's Madhurya Rasa. So this is the fullest manifestation of Krishna in Madhurya Rasa. There is a quality of the Lord in nectar devotion. There is a series of qualities that distinguish Vishnu forms from Shiva. Jivas can have 50 qualities, Shiva has 55 qualities, and Vishnu has 60 qualities. So among those 5 extra qualities of Vishnu over Shiva is Hata Ari Gati Dayaka. The Lord gives special destination to the enemies he kills. So when Vishnu kills a demon, he does not go to hell. He gets some nice blessing. That's illustrated here. Nrsimhadev kills Hiranyakasipu. He doesn't go to hell. What happens? He becomes Ravana. He gets to enjoy nicely his kingdom in Sri Lanka. Rama kills him. Yeah? So again, Lord kills him. What happens? He doesn't go to hell. What happens? He becomes Shishupala, and he gets to enjoy nicely again. Krishna kills Shishupala. What happens? Goes to Vaikuntha. So when Krishna kills, we saw the hierarchy in the Nrsimhadev, Rama, Krishna at the top. Krishna's got the most qualities, most mercy, etc. When Nrsimhadev and Rama kill the demon, get the normal, no hellish existence, nice enjoyment. When Krishna kills the demon, what happens? Vaikuntha. So, very special. The other forms of the Lord do not get Vaikuntha. The other forms of the demons, they don't get Vaikuntha when the Lord kills them. But when Krishna kills the demon, he goes to Vaikuntha. Very special. So, therefore, Krishna shows more power of control, power of time and karma, greater mercy, greater sweetness. Now, all these qualities, of course, Rupa Goswami in Nectar Devotion points out that the unique qualities of Krishna are his sweet qualities. So he has 4 sweet qualities. Sweetness of his form. So sweetness means that his form will invoke a very intimate type of love in which you do not see in the Supreme Lord at all. You just have very great affection for Krishna as a child, a lover, or your friend. Yeah, but not as God. So this is Rupa Madhurya. Simply seeing that form invokes this very, very intimate type of love. So that's one special quality of Krishna that's not there in Rama, Nrsimha, or Vishnu forms. Bhakti Madhurya. Krishna is surrounded by all sorts of devotees with this sweet relationship. There are devotees in Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. All may never see Krishna as God. So very intimate relationships. The other forms of God usually can only establish relationships in Shanta and Dasya, but seeing God as very reverent as Supreme Lord. With Krishna, they don't see the Supreme Lord, and we get a variety of rasas. We have millions of gopis, millions of convert boys, millions of elders in these different rasas, not manifest in other forms of the Lord. And because we have all these devotees with this sweetness of affection, we have the sweet form of Krishna, we get all sorts of sweet pastimes, the sweetness of which we do not see in other forms of God, because they're seeing Supreme Lord, what type of intimate relationship you establish with Nrsimhadev, for instance. They're pulling apart the demons. So your relationship, you're seeing him as Supreme Lord, definitely. And yes, you have affection, whatever, but still it's a little bit distant. With Krishna, we have all sorts of remarkable pastimes, such as Damodar pastime, in which Mother Yasoda can tie up Krishna. Nobody ties up Vishnu, nobody ties up Rama, nobody ties up Nrsimhadev, but Mother Yasoda can tie up Krishna. So that type of intimacy in the pastimes is not there in the other forms, but there in Krishna. And then the last thing is sweetness of the flute. Okay? So the flute is a very special, it's not a weapon, it's a musical instrument. But with that, he conquers everybody. Yeah? So everybody who hears, anyone who hears the flute becomes inundated with this sweet prema. Even the rocks and the trees and the water, they all start going into ecstasy when they get the vibration of the flute. So this flute sounds very special. It invokes this madhurya of sweetness. So in this way, Krishna has these four special qualities. And therefore, Krishna is put up at the very top as Swami Bhagavan. So as I mentioned in the beginning, it's a struggle for many people. Well, of course, it's a struggle just to get to the idea that God exists. And then when God exists, he exists, but he doesn't have a form. And then just to get a form of God is a big struggle. Most religions don't have that. And even in India, many people don't accept it. There's only the Vaishnavas that accept form of God. But the speciality of the Bhagavatam is that the highest form is Krishna. That's the highest form of Bhagavan. And if we do bhakti and worship this Krishna, we can experience highest rasa's most intense relationship and consequently get the most bliss. And that is the ultimate goal of the jiva, to be eternally happy in the spiritual world with the ultimate quantities of bliss. So we get that from worshiping Krishna. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Dattatreya avatar, because Dattatreya
Dattatreya. Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more? But there's in Maharashtra they worship for Dattatreya.
Yeah, some places they worship. Bhagavatam does not concentrate too much. His main contribution is he teaches, and he teaches about Atma. Not so much about Bhakti, except about Atma. Just as the Kumaras also teach about Atma and Jnana. So Dattatreya teaches something similar to that.
When you talk about the expansion of the Lord, so ultimately we also expansions of the Lord. So don't we come under the category like Prabhava or something like that where...
Well, if you're an Aveshavatar, you can do that. But the Aveshavatar is special because they eternally got that spiritual body as jivas. So we are also expansions of the Lord, but like the Avesh avatars, we are still small particles of consciousness, and generally we can maybe get 50 of the qualities out of 64 qualities, but in very small quantity. So that's the very nature of the jiva, not exactly similar to God. Similar in one sense because we can at least get 50 of the 64 qualities, but then very small quantity. However, the nature of the Lord is such He's very merciful even to the jivas who are not Shakadesh avatars. And when the jiva practices bhakti, pure bhakti, and attains prema, then that jiva becomes more powerful than the Lord. Prema conquers the Lord. The prema of the jiva can conquer the Lord, so the ultimate quality of bhakti is it attracts the Lord. So the devotee is able to control the Lord, ultimately, even though this is the little jiva. So the Lord surrenders to the devotee. That's his wonderful quality. Even though he's the supreme form, he becomes controlled by the devotee, and that we see in the example of Yasoda. Krishna agrees to get tied up. Krishna agrees to get chased by a stick. Krishna cries whenever he is completely controlled by Mother Yasoda. So that is the nature of Supreme Lord. He is controlled by the devotee, even though the jiva is completely different from the Lord because he's a little small, and so the Lord is everything.
I'm looking at that a little bit late, but you were saying that when Krishna kills, the being that he kills goes to Vaikuntha.
Sometimes they go to Brahman also.
Okay, because when you talk about Shishupal, from what I've read about Shishupal, he entered into the effulgence of the Lord. Right?
Yeah.
So he didn't actually get to Vaikuntha.
Yeah, so he entered into the Lord, then he went to Vaikuntha. Similar to Aghasur, also merged into the body of the Lord, but then it says later on he actually went to Vaikuntha later on. So some of these demons, like Putana also, she went and got a form of a nurse in the spiritual world. Some get a form in the spiritual world. Some just get merged and they stay there in Brahman also. That's the usual demon, but some get the special privilege to actually go into the spiritual world also and have a spiritual forms. Sometimes, but mercy of Krishna. Okay. Oh.
Maharaj mentioned that there are different types of rasas in Krishna Lila, and like do we experience, like cannot pure devotee experience that in Chaitanya Leelas?
In Chaitanya pastimes. Yeah. So the devotees of Chaitanya are kind of similar. So there is Madhurya Rasa, etc. They take a little bit of a different form. So of course we do have Madhurya Rasa in the sense of Lord Chaitanya had two wives, Vishnu Priya, etc. So that's Madhurya Rasa. We also have Gadadhar. He's also in Madhurya Rasa, but it's quite different because he's acting as a devotee and Lord Chaitanya is acting as a devotee. So it's not explicit. It's not like he's running around like a gopi or whatever like that. And Krishna's also not acting like, playing his flute with a peacock feather. So there is that Madhurya Rasa, but it's a little bit hidden. There is Vatsalya Rasa. So we see that Krishna's parent, Lord Chaitanya's parents, they're in Vatsalya Rasa. And I think Srinivasa Pandit's wife also in Vatsalya Rasa with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda. And then when you get Sakya Rasa, a lot of the associates of Nityananda were actually cowherd boys in Krishna Lila. So they are in Sakya Rasa with Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya. And then we have the servants of Lord Chaitanya and Dasya Rasa. So we get the rasas there in general. But a little bit covered up, especially the Madhurya Rasa.
The information is clear, it is on top, but some Vaishnava cyclists, like Sri Vaishnavas, they only say as Narayana, so they don't go beyond that.
Yeah. So of course, as I said, all the forms even Brahman, Parma, Bhagwan are all part of the Supreme Lord, so we can't really criticize them. And if you prefer Brahman, fine, we cannot do anything about it. And then if you choose Bhagavan, they're all one. So Vishnu, Krishna, Rama, they're all one in one sense. They're all Bhagavan. And you may develop attraction for any of those forms. And if you do, fine. We don't object to that. So when Lord Chaitanya was in South India in Sri Rangam for 4 months, he was with the Sri Vaishnavas there, and they were worshipping Ranganath, who's Vishnu form. And Lord Chaitanya joked with him, actually Krishna's higher, and Lakshmi's actually attracted to go to the Rasa Leela, but she can't even go because she's not in the form of a gopi, the Krishna's higher. So he would joke with them, but he never forced them to say, okay, give up the worship of Narayan, just worship Krishna. He never said that, because they were attracted to that form. Similarly, in his own pastimes in Navadvip, Murari Gupta was dedicated to Rama. And Lord Chaitanya said, oh, you should worship Krishna. Give up Rama. Krishna's more exalted. Yes, my Bhagavan. Sweet. And Murari Gupta thought about it at night, and he couldn't sleep. And then he said, no, I cannot follow your order. I'm dedicated to Rama. So Lord Chaitanya said, very good. You cannot give up Rama. Very good. Okay. So it's acceptable to be attracted to other forms, Vishnu, Rama, or Krishna, or whatever. But at the same time, what it says, the highest, most intense form is, Madhurya Rasa, the gopis, etc. Radha is the highest gopi. That's the highest tattva. But not everybody may be attracted to that, so we could always have other forms. In Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, is that we have the cowherd boy forms in Sakya Rasa, Abhiram Thakur and others. So they actually started a movement of Sakya Rasa devotees, not Madhurya Rasa, but Sakya Rasa, identify themselves as cowherd boys and trying to attain the form of a cowherd boy in Vrindavan. So there was that movement. It died out later on, but there was that movement there also. So there were some devotees interested in Sakya Rasa also. So therefore, it's not that you have to have just one form of the Lord or one rasa, etc. Some variety is allowed also.
What is the quickest way to get prema?
The quickest way is you chant the holy name with sufficient knowledge. That's it. Nam Sankirtan. Yeah. So that's the process. There's a story I'm going to read at Bhagavatamrita. Gopa Kumar, he got Diksha, and he got a Diksha mantra, 10-syllable Diksha mantra, same as what you're chanting about. Chanting this Krishna mantra and whatever. Or a whole day of fun, actually. And he ascended to Svargaloka, Brahmaloka, Shivaloka, and Vaikuntha, and even up to Brahma, Ayodhya. And Narada Muni came at that point. So he'd been chanting your mantra. If you want to go to Goloka, you have to do Nam Sankirtan. So then he did Nam Sankirtan, and then he went up to Goloka. So in other words, in order to get to the highest level, that is, enter into Goloka, you have to do Nam Sankirtan, higher than any other process in one.
He cursed Krishna about the family. Krishna said that there was nobody else in the battlefield. It was only me.
No, when he's saying that Gandhari cursed Krishna. Gandhari.
Okay.
He cursed Krishna. And Krishna said, there was nobody in the battlefield, it was just me. I was the one doing the whole thing. So, what is your question?
So what does that mean?
He's asking, what does that mean?
Well, Krishna was the only one in the battlefield.
That's what he...
Oh, I don't know. What's the story?
So his question is, Maharaj, that Arjuna was also him, Duryodhana was also Krishna, like all those souls.
Krishna was saying to Gandhari that he was the one killing everybody. Nobody.
Okay. Instead of individuals.
Yeah.
Ultimately, because everything is by the will of Krishna. As we see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives Arjuna a vision of the universal form. And then at a certain point, everybody in the Kurukshetra war goes into the mouth of it, gets devoured, and its universal form is chewing them all up and swallowing everybody. So it's all being determined by me already before the war started. This is Arjuna speaking to Arjuna. It's already happened. It's all destined. So that to a certain extent, yes, Krishna arranges things, and so he's the ultimate doer. Yeah? But of course, within that, then the individuals do have some free will, but ultimately it's Krishna's plan that certain things happen. And we cannot speculate on what that plan is. Even the devotees don't know. Even Bhishma didn't know. He was also puzzled, right? Why the Pandavas have to suffer so much, why they had to, stay in the forest, why didn't Krishna help them, whatever. He was also bewildered. So Krishna acts in certain ways we don't really understand. After everything's over, then we understand that there's a certain purpose of Krishna to relieve the earth of burden through the Pandavas, etc.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, when you were showing in the different forms, positively effulgence and then form, and you mentioned about how there are many religions that are up to the first and second form. And you said it's acceptable for everyone to be attracted to any form of Krishna.
Yeah.
Then why the same initiation should never be
Why do we reject that?
Yes.
Or criticize it? So, in one sense, we accept it because Bhagavan says Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan is all Advaita Jnana, it's all one Supreme Lord. So in that sense, we accept. But just like we also say Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Stanga Yoga, Bhakti, okay, all this is mentioned in the Vedas, so acceptable because it's Vedic. But then Krishna says, okay, Savar Dharma Practice, give up all dharmas, just do Bhakti. So we accept everything, at the same time we also say it's not all the same. So Karma Yoga is not the same as Bhakti Yoga. And therefore we say, okay, we do the highest, and we reject everything else. So similar, there is Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, but if we want the highest, then we reject the lower things also. So we reject the Brahman and the Paramatma in favor of Bhagavan.
And so do we also, that first and second form, so should we accept that God allows cruelty to happen in those kind of faith, like whatever, devotion? Because there's a lot of things that happen in those religions or, ways where they're worshipping the impersonal form of Brahman, and there's a lot of cruelty in those religions.
Other religions.
Other religions.
Well, of course we have, as I said, we have religions that over time they may get somewhat distorted, and therefore they're not really following the original precepts, etc. So therefore, even in the Vedas, same thing happened. And therefore, Buddha came along and said, nonsense, Vedas are killing animals, or doing animal sacrifices, let's reject the Vedas completely. So even in the Vedas, the same thing happens. Certain things get overemphasized, and then they get distracted, so therefore it has to get rejected sooner or later. Okay. Hare Krishna.
What time is Mark leaving? In the morning. All right. Thank you, Ganga. See you next time, huh?